verse of the Gita makes a very big statement, and the statement is Panditaha na anushochanti. Okay, so Pandita means wise people do not grieve. That's the statement. Okay, grieve for whom? Gata suna agata sumscha. For people who are there and people who are not there. Right? The first verse. Okay. Now, people who are there and not there, it's a representative of what different situations which come in life. Okay. So that means what is mostly accepted by everyone, which is the event which produces the most grief? Death. Exactly. Right? Death is the one which is producing the most grief. It's the most difficult thing for anybody to deal with. Either just the idea of one's own going away from the world, as well as all the loved ones, right? Losing your loved ones. And what is the problem that Arjuna was faced with? Exactly. Right? So he was traumatized by the fact that he, using his free will, had to kill all the people. Right? So therefore, this grief, if you look at it from the standpoint of our own lives, right? It is the death is the biggest source of grief. And in his case, it was not something which was just a natural death. It was what, through his own actions, he had to do it. So imagine the magnitude of his grief.
He was compelled to do it.
Absolutely. No, one minute. I'm just, don't read into, just try to understand what I'm saying, right? So therefore, he says, Panditaha na anushochanti. So that means if you are a wise person, then you don't have this grief for people who are there and people who are gone. Okay, what does it mean? You reprogram your brain and say, okay, now I don't want to feel grief, I don't want to feel grief. Is it? No. If you try to do that, you are going to be caught in one whole big chakkar of trying to control your emotions, which you can't do. Please understand, all these teachings are very profound. You make it into a rule like that, you are gone forever. Right? So therefore, what is talked about is not controlling your emotions and not feeling what you naturally feel, but what? Increase your scale of understanding of things, in light of which every event is what put in its own perspective. The minute you put things in its right place, right, your capacity to deal with any situation is much better. Otherwise, you will think that the whole teaching is don't be sad. And then you will try to what? Before also we have, the only way we have learned to deal with our emotions is what? Suppressing them. Right from childhood, your parents tell you, good girls and good boys, they don't cry, they are not sad, they are not angry, they are not whatever. They are not jealous. And what is the reality? Then, yeah, exactly. How? It is the biggest, I think it's the biggest disservice to this amazing book when people talk about things like that, because it's unhealthy. It's possible nor it is healthy. Okay, so therefore your range of emotions, including your fear about going, is something that it's not told that you should suppress. What it says is your scale of understanding has to rise so much that every event, when you put in its right perspective, your capacity to deal with it is what? Much more. So you don't act out of panic, you don't act out of this overwhelming the feeling, but you act out of that lucidity and clarity. So a wise person is not the person who has no emotions. Please understand. Okay? A wise person has the knowledge or the wisdom which far exceeds what? The force of emotions. So therefore every emotion is dealt with properly. Okay? So this is why he says ashocha nanva shochastvam. Okay? So therefore you are speaking what? You are grieving for something which doesn't need to be so much grieved for, but you are also prajna iva bhashamscha vashase. Okay, bhashase. What does it mean? That you are speaking like a wise person. So we saw, why was he speaking like a wise person but he was not yet wise? Why?
Because he was deluding himself, was delusional.
So he was not wise because he was overwhelmed by a situation. He was so overwhelmed, he was incapacitated to do. He didn't know what to do. So therefore there was no lucidity. He didn't have clarity about what needs to be done. He lacked a proper perspective. So therefore he was not wise. But he says, but you are speaking as though you are wise. Why?
Because speaking all the right things.
Exactly. Right? So as Ava says, that not knowing the right perspective, as I told you last time, both Duryodhana did not have right perspective and Arjuna also did not have right perspective. But there was a huge difference in their position. What was Duryodhana's position?
Out of greed.
Absolutely. All he wanted was grab the kingdom. He didn't care at all about what happened to his cousins or whatever. He didn't want to let go 1 ounce of land in the negotiations with Lord Krishna, right? So his was, take as much as possible, who cares about anything else, and I'm just interested in what myself and increasing my scope of what wealth, power and all that. Right? Now Arjuna had confusion, but can you put him in the same category as Duryodhana? No. Please understand, people who are ignorant are not people who are just ignorant. Don't put them all in one basket. There is a range of people. Okay? What was Arjuna thinking? He told why he did not want to fight. And what all did he say why he did not want to fight?
He was faced with the loved ones.
One, the first reason he said is that I see on both sides my own people. Right? What was Dhritarashtra saying? My people and Pandavas, as though the Pandavas were other than his people. Absolutely. Whereas Arjuna said that I see nothing but my own people on both sides. Right? So his sense of mine was far larger. Okay? That was the only one of the reasons why he did not want to fight. Generally, when people talk about Gita, they highlight this fact that he saw his own cousins and his own teachers and all. But that was only the first reason he gave. He gave number of reasons why he did not want to fight. Do any one of you remember the number of reasons he gave why he didn't want to fight?
One is for the overall destruction.
Excellent. Right? So, excellent. What he said is that not only my people would be gone, but imagine there are so many people who have come here, right, to fight. So the overall loss of life. Okay? So therefore he was thinking beyond what just his own people, and he was thinking about what result his own actions are going to have on others who are not his people. Okay? So he was a very responsible human being. That was the second reason he gave. What was the third reason he gave?
He was killing his teachers who had
That falls into the first. That fell into this first category. Yeah, all the people he loves and all the people that he feels close to. Exactly. So the impact, he said, after the war, the impact it is going to have on family survivors. So he says, imagine, yeah, exactly. He said, if I were to win the war, I have to kill all these people who are present. Then imagine the kind of society that I will create after the war. Okay? Women and kids alone, right, without any father figure. So he says, now you go and it's unimaginable. When I used to live in the US, you meet people from Palestine and you meet people like that, and the way they talk about, a country which is fraught with war for years together, and the kind of totally dysfunctional life people have. They said any time at night there is a bomb and you just have to, run down. I mean, the kind of insecurities that they live with, it's just appalling how you can't even imagine. And the children, and and then so therefore constant, they live under constant fear. Okay, I have my husband's sister is visiting, and she lives in one of these African countries, and they are very affluent, but she says, oh my God, I can't believe people are walking on the street.
Oh my God.
Because walking on the street is source of fear. It's unimaginable. She says, yeah. So, and she asked me, so yeah. After this bomb blast in Taj and Oberoi, do people still go there? I said, yeah, people just go there. I mean, without even thinking. Yeah, exactly. And there's no. She says, oh my God, you're not traumatized. I said, no. I mean, of course we feel for them and whatever. But imagine the fear that has gone into your psyche, which sees danger and
Controls your life.
absolutely. The extent to which it governs your life, it is something which is mind-boggling, right? Any dysfunctional society in which you live, it creates psychological impact, right? So therefore, here he says, imagine after the war, what kind of society I would create through my own actions. That was the third reason that he didn't want to fight. And what was the fourth reason he didn't want to fight?
He said that even if he won the war, there was no point of all those the kingdom and the riches, because he wouldn't have his love of it.
Absolutely. So what Aparna is saying is right. He actually divided, the fourth reason is divided in two parts. He said, the first thing he said is that imagine I have won the war, causing all this destruction, causing all these dysfunctionalities in the society. What kind of quality of life am I going to have? Is it really worth it? Right? So that was the first reason he said, and then he understood this whole thing of what cause and effect relationship. He says that, this is what, unfortunately, we don't understand it accurately, but we will study it in detail later, and this is what we call the karma. Right? Using your free will, if you create this kind of destruction and suffering, then he said that I have heard that a person who does even something which is inappropriate, they go to Naraka. Naraka is a place which is, it's kind of an unpleasant place. Yeah, exactly. So hell is not that you're condemned to hell forever or anything. Our whole concept is little different. Yeah, not a happy place, and then you have to pay, or even when you come back, what happens? You have to undergo some difficulties, right? So he says now, what is the result which is going to accrue to me, not only now that I will not be able to enjoy, but even in the future. Okay, making this choice. So therefore he says, I don't want to fight. Okay. So now, he was also not totally lucid, but imagine where his analysis was. So this is why Lord Krishna was telling him that wise people don't grieve. You are grieving for something which doesn't deserve grieving, in the sense that your understanding is not totally clear, right? But you are speaking like a wise person. Because your analysis is a very analysis of a person who's evolved person, right? So therefore, now he begins to teach as to what is the perspective, right? Now, as I told you, the whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita is divided in two parts. One is called Brahma Vidya, and the other one is called Yoga Shastra. Okay, what is Brahma Vidya? Brahma Vidya is some basic re-understanding about who you are, what is the nature of the universe, what is the nature of the cause of the universe. Because if I ask you who you are, who are you? Each one of you, if I ask, you will give me some answer, and that is not the answer that Lord Krishna has. That means there is some basic confusion about who you are. If I ask you what is the nature of the universe, you will give me some answer. That is not in keeping with what Lord Krishna is talking about. If I ask you about what is the cause of the universe, you will give me, each of you may give me different answer, and maybe none of the answers correspond to what he is talking about, right? So therefore, the knowledge that Bhagavad Gita gives is making you stretch your thinking way beyond our accepted norm, right? So therefore, you have to relook, putting life in perspective, not just making little adjustments, re-understanding a very big picture. Okay, so that is something which belongs to Brahma Vidya. Now, when you begin to re-understand everything, then how do you define your life? What do you want to accomplish in your life? Why have you come to Gita class?
To get a perspective on your way of thinking in certain ways.
Okay.
Get clarity on that.
Excellent. So very few people have come actually to Bhagavad Gita for Brahma Vidya part. Most of the people have come to Bhagavad Gita because they have little difficulties. They have difficulties in their relationships, they have difficulty with their spouse, they have difficulty with their kids, they have difficulty with in-laws. I mean, they have these simple little difficulties, and that little difficulty is occupying their mind. What?
Because it's so magnified by you.
Absolutely. So therefore, people don't come to Bhagavad Gita to find out some big philosophical answers. They come to solve their little problems, right? So therefore, when Bhagavad Gita talks about this bigger picture, they say this is what? Abstract. This is not connected to my life, because the way you have defined your life is what? Very simple, small things. They occupy 95% of your mental life. So therefore, even though this big picture is so relevant for you to live differently, it seems like not connected to the way you have presently defined your life. Okay, so therefore, Bhagavad Gita says, hey, when we talk about knowing realities, you can't only talk about those big things. You also have to what? Take care of your little things. They are very important. So therefore, because then only you'll be able to live a meaningful life. Okay, so therefore, this whole part of Yoga Shastra is about our day-to-day transactions in the world. Okay, what are your attitudes, what kind of understanding that you must have. So that means the whole Yoga Shastra is, unless you're able to be more or less clear about small decisions, you can't, your mind is not equipped enough to think about bigger things. Bigger things will always seem like irrelevant for you. They'll seem like abstract things for you, not connected to your life. So therefore, you need to, any teaching, in order to be complete, it has to take care of both. Okay, so Yoga Shastra is talking about our day-to-day living and the kind of transformation we have to initiate in order to live meaningfully. Okay, that is your personal growth. So that is Yoga Shastra. Now, which of the two Lord Krishna chooses to speak about first? You have two options. One is what? That little adjustments that you need to make in your day-to-day living, and the second is what? That big picture which requires a major paradigm shift. Which, if you were to teach, which of the two topics you will choose first?
Yoga Shastra. Because you have to learn ABCD to be able to speak, na?
So the automatically,
Yeah.
you look at the bigger picture, so automatically the
Automatically
small
your
ones
everyday
are
ones
insignificant.
follow. Small ones will
The
drop
small
off.
ones are remaining, and the bigger picture will then
Because the
automatically
small
look
one will
after that.
automatically be taken care of.
A lot of it will be taken care of, and then you need to supplement it with some other facts, right? So he chooses to talk about bigger picture first, right? He talks about both, please understand, right? But he talks about the bigger picture first, because it's like a frog in a well, right? Now for that frog, the well is defined as
His world.
his entire universe. right? And that position itself is what is the universe? What is the real universe? Huge, but what is his universe?
Limited in that way.
Very, very limited to this well, right? So now the first, what you have to do,
Come out of it.
come out and show that this world which you have defined like this is actually this world. But after having shown him this world, he still is living where?
In that small
In
one.
that small well. You also have to, you can't just negate that. Then you have to say, hey, the world is this, but within that big world, your place is this, and here you have to, what? Make some changes. Because before, what? Your whole thing is, this is the world and that's it. So you take him out, show him the reality, then also make him accept this place, and then also how to deal with that given place. Okay, that is the whole method of teaching. Okay, so therefore the first thing is what? The biggest source of sorrow is what? That mortality is the cause of sorrow. So therefore, what is the reality is about you, about I, is explained in the next verse. So Bhagavad Gita, the second verse, it says, न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. You will chant after me, you know, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think these words themselves are beautiful. If you want, I'll break it down. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः. Very good. अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. Okay, so now the first thing is that I am mortal. This is the conclusion that everybody has, right? Now, how true is this conclusion? Here he says, Atma is na hanyate hanyamane sharire. What does it mean? Sharira is the body. It is hanyate. Hanyate means it is subject to destruction. Okay, but this Atma na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Okay, this Atma is something which is not subject to destruction when the body dies. Okay, so therefore, what does it mean? As long as if I ask you who you are, and if your answer is, in your answer, if you mix the nature of I with the body, then what is it the reality or is it a confusion? Confusion. Right? So if I ask you who are you, nobody actually says I am the body. If I ask you who are you, what will you say?
I'm Ava.
Exactly. You know, so that means the name that is given to, and that name is totally random, right? Because that whoever mother or grandmother or father, they, okay, now call this person Ava. It could have been told something different also. Okay. Now that name becomes such a reality that if you misspell, then what person gets so hurt. We give so much importance to this name, which is actually just a random name for this body. Right? Now, this body, if I ask you a little bit more, okay, in addition to name, what else, if I were to, how would you describe yourself?
Generally talk about
Your
your
nature, your
occupation,
personality.
your pers-
Okay, so just tell me, okay, your personality, your occupation, and what else?
Profession,
Your profession. Your qualification, what else?
you do,
Family
what you
that
do.
you're in.
The family that you're in.
Physical features.
Excellent, right? The first thing that actually everything else that you all said comes a little later. The first thing is your physical features, right? So that means the first thing is everybody has a self-image. And that self-image, so much of your physical appearance is part of your self-image. Okay? So that means people say I'm tall, or I'm not so tall, or I'm fair, or I'm not fair.
Fat and thin.
Fat and thin, that's an obsession.
Long
It's
hair,
not
short
even,
hair.
yeah. All these things for you, it becomes so intrinsically defined as you. Right? So therefore, you will be surprised. I have a friend who works in an ad company, and he works with a big company. What is that? I forgot the name of this company. Okay, and he is a creative director, and he told me that the cream that sells the most in South India is Fair and Lovely.
Fairness cream, yeah.
Fairness cream.
Obsession.
Yeah, it's an obsession. Okay, so that means everybody wants to be fair. So, and that is also the dark people not only know that what they are dark, they suffer from inferiority complex. So that means so much of your identity is actually defined by what the color of your skin, and you carry complexes around it. And then that can lead to jealousy, that can lead to all kinds of crazy behaviors. So that means,
society, at least Indian society has been
yeah,
like that.
absolutely. So that means that there is some societal norm.
Yeah, society.
No, the whole
Great
world.
society.
All over the world.
I mean,
Racism also.
racism, blacks and this and that, which are they face all this to all societies. Poor things.
Right? So therefore, it's not a small, first of all,
Moment the child is born, first special guru check.
Goro check.
Guru check.
And a chokro check.
Chokra check and nothing. Yeah, exactly. Even your gender, right? And how you're going to be treated is going to be decided by gender of the body. So therefore, even if nobody actually makes the statement, I am as good as the body, so much of our self-image is connected to absolutely some aspect of the body, the gender, the characteristics, all of that. Okay. Now, if you think of yourself as good as the body, and then you try to fix it, like Americans do, because you think that you are the body, then you can't stand aging body. Then what do you need to do? All kinds of surgery. So that means all our solutions come from what? Keeping that error. I am the body, that is a fact. Then what? Keeping that error going, I want to find solutions. And if I keep on intervening, and by the time, people say that on an average they go through, I don't know how many, what they call this surgeries in their lifetime, is just incredible. And then not only that, by the time you fix your face, and there is some other part of your body, and which is
It happens so much here, does it?
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It may or may not, but what I'm saying is,
Page 3 actresses' lifestyle and
They
things.
keep looking different in every movie.
Now-
Our lips are different, this is different, everything changes.
you know what? I just few days ago in Times of India, I read that in France now. You read? No, I don't know what you read, but I read.
Talking about the cream, the penis cream.
The picture of the dark lady and the fair lady.
But that was not
And how
France.
fair cells as opposed to
Not
dark.
France, that was somewhere in Paris. That's where it was coming from.
Thailand.
Exactly.
Thailand. Yeah,
Thailand,
Thailand.
and they've asked them to remove the picture because it was like terrible.
Yeah.
They're creating problems because
It-
it's Paris.
In France now, this is Times of India news, few days ago. It said that in France, they look at these models who are like sticks.
Really skinny, yeah.
And they said they all want to emulate.
Yeah.
They just want to kind of, be like them.
Yeah.
So now there is a minimum weight that all these models have to be. Because
For their own
they have to
well-being.
pass, for their own well-being, and then otherwise it's not just that they influence others, they influence so many people. People become anorexic, and people have all kinds of
Bulimia,
eating,
this and that.
eating disorders, because we have created models, the role models, which are like totally dysfunctional in the first place. Okay, so that means it's not only Indian problem of fairness. Please understand, right? Complexes around body are something which is not, it's universal, different kinds of complexes. Right? And your whole self-image gets, and we all try to solve the problem keeping this error going. Okay, and then there is no solution. By the time we fix one thing, we end up with some other problem. So therefore, the wisest thing is to figure out what is my relationship with the body. Am I as good as the body, or am I something which is much more than the body? Okay, so here he says, na jayate mriyate va kadachita. The Atma, I, is something which is never born and it is never dying. Okay, so here he says, nayam bhutva bhavitana bhuyaha. Okay, so that means it is not something which is coming into being and then going. Okay, so that means the body is coming and going. No, 1 minute. Body is coming and going. Okay, so that means, and it is born and it is gone. So that means Atma is distinct from the body. This is a huge thing. This is why it is making you think about realities in a different way. This is that Brahma Vidya is stretching your norm. Because everybody lives thinking I'm as good as the body. Now this is making you see something which is way beyond that. So you are not how you have defined yourself as. Okay? So who are you? Ajaha, Nityaha, Shashvataha, Puranaha. Okay? So who are you? So that is, it says, you are unborn, you are eternal, which does not undergo change and which is ever new. My God. Is this something that you just have to take it as reality because Bhagavad Gita is saying it? No. The whole teaching has its value because I'm going to make you discover here and now how it is so. Please understand. So therefore, this is all exploring realities. It's not something that you just have to say, Bhagavad Gita is saying Atma is eternal and Atma is not born and Atma is free, therefore I am free. No, that would be like what? That would be like what? Blind belief. But if I make you see how it is true, then it doesn't become belief, it becomes what? Teaching. That's why we don't say, we say what? Teaching of Bhagavad Gita. So now let's do this inquiry. Right? Now this inquiry is very profound. Please listen. Okay? Now this body is something which I think I am. So the first responsibility of any teacher is to show you why you are not the body. Then it can show you what you are. First it has to start by showing you, because everybody thinks oneself to be as good as the body and defines one's own characteristics by the characteristic of the body. So I have to show you why you're not that. Then I can show you who you are. Okay? So now, why... tell me one reason that you may think why you're not the body. If Bhagavad Gita says that, why shouldn't you take yourself to be as good as the body? Tell me why. Do you have any idea as to why you may not be the body?
because you can look at it as an object. You can see. Oh,
Because the body has its limitations.
Okay. Yeah, but the body has its limitation need not then mean anything, right? I mean, yeah, so then you can conclude I am limited. But as Aparna says that there is one method that the whole teaching uses, which is what we call Drik Drishya Viveka. What is this Drik Drishya Viveka? There is this whole thing between what is the subject and what is an object. Okay. Now, if I ask you, is this table a subject or an object? What would you tell me? It's an object, right? Is this sofa subject or an object? Object, right? Even if is this cloth, is this subject or an object? Object, right? So therefore, it has got nothing to do with distance, right? Even though this cloth is very near to me, I am not confused that it is an object, right? But the body, when I say, is it subject or object? What will you say? Excellent. This is the mistake we make. We take it as subject, but actually, as Aparna is saying, it's an object. Why is it an object? Why do you say that it's an object? You actually can observe this body, right? From the time of birth till now, how many changes have taken place? How many changes? You look at your photo 10 years ago and you will see a change, right? When you see yourself every day in the mirror, then the changes are small, you don't even recognize. But you go back and see yourself 20 years ago and you will see the huge change that is there, right? So therefore, and if you look at the cellular level, this is just biology, right? The cells that you are born with, none of the cells exist in your body right now. They regenerate. Every 12 years, none of the cells that you were born with, you have. Every 12 years, it regenerates. This is why when somebody, this is a way, in fact we used to say, when somebody becomes a vegetarian, then after 12 years, they say the body is totally vegetarian. Why? Because none of the cells which were fed on non-veg exist in the body after 12 years.
you're not really a vegetarian until you start 12 years.
12 years really, because otherwise you have, yeah? So therefore, this is where, in fact there is science behind it, why we said it. So therefore, this is something which is a fact. Cellular level, things are going, right? The changes which are taking place constantly. Now, are you the change or are you the observer of the change? You're the observer, right? So that means the nature of mistake that we make is a huge mistake. That whatever is drishya, whatever is seen by me, whatever is an object is taken to be what? The subject. Body is limited. Nobody can make it free from limitation. Body is born. Nobody can stop that birth. Body will go one day. With all the scientific discovery, people were very happy and said, now in a few years scientists can find a way for us to live for 150 years, average age. I mean, average means like now how, they said Victorian times, what was the average age? 35 years old. Just few years ago, don't think it was like, an average age, the adult was like in old age by the time they were 40s. And now look at 40s, people look like, they are so young, like you all, right? Look like all college going girls. So therefore, so that means what? That you are able to, with scientific discoveries and all, we can actually, it can become a reality for people to live for 150 years. Okay? But the fact is, even if you extend the age from 100 to 150 years, in a countless flow of time, what is 150 years? Tell me. Still insignificant. Are you eliminating the problem of mortality? No, you're not eliminating, right? So that means if you're defining yourself as the body, you cannot get away from death. But if you are free from, you are something which is much more than the body, and by mistake we define ourselves as the body and suffer from notion of mortality, then through this teaching, what can we do? Free ourselves from that what imagined bondage of mortality, right? So therefore what it says is, you are the subject and the body falls in the category of object. And what is the mistake we make? We take it as the subject, right? So therefore, and if we make that mistake, not only we have this mortality, which is the basic fear that we have, but during the lifetime, what happens? All the different conditions of the body which are not acceptable to us, they define our self-image, and we suffer all kinds of complexes based on the characteristics of the body. Now, the one thing that is very important, which very often Vedanta teachers don't make you understand, is that you're not the body doesn't mean that you don't have a special relationship with this body. Right? Among all the different houses, you do have given relationship with one house, and because you have a given relationship with one house, can you say the house is not me, so let me make it all a mess? Can you say that? Exactly, right? So that means you do have a special relationship with one house, and even though the house is not I, would you keep it clean or not? You would keep it clean. You would keep it beautiful and pleasant or not? You would. Right? Would you just, all your aesthetic sense and all, will you say it's not I, so I'll let it be just anything? And what painting, what does it matter? Whatever it is. Do you say that? No. Okay? Unfortunately, Vedanta teachers, when they say I'm not the body, then people understand, oh, I'm not the body, therefore I have to be what? Totally indifferent to this body. That is the biggest mistake people make. Okay? You have a special relationship with this body. You have to keep it disease free. You have to exercise. You have to keep it aesthetically beautiful. You can, for us, it is just amazing, Some of you do this, some puja you have at home. Who has puja at home? You have, right? How do you bathe the deity? What do? Then you put clothes on the deity. You really shangar all these beautiful. Is it considered engaging in material world? Is it? No. Please understand, these are alien ideas to Indian spirituality. You keep it beautiful. You look at some Srinathji, they are aesthetically so beautiful, so attractive. They are so well decorated, with so much care. Your body is like that. It is a gift. It is a gift that you have come with, and you have to take care of it. Just because you are much more than the body doesn't mean that you have to be indifferent to the body. Otherwise, it becomes all a complex-based spirituality. Oh, the minute you start looking nice, oh, I'm engaging in material world. Problem. I don't want to be materialistic. These are all our own confusions. Vedanta is saying a fact, you don't understand that fact fully and you create further complexes around it. Either you are totally engaged or you don't want to engage thinking that it is a material pursuit. Both are wrong. Vedanta only shows a fact. So that means living with clarity means you have to understand things accurately. We always give more meaning than what actually is the reality. Okay? So the fact that you are not the body does not mean that you have to stop dressing well, you have to stop, keeping it beautiful. There's nothing wrong. It is beautiful. It's all part of aesthetics. Just as you take care of the Lord's body and decorate it, you have to do it here. Take care of yourself. Absolutely. In that decoration, there is this is all our own culture. Please, I'm not giving my advice. This is the spiritual heritage of India. Okay? In that decoration, what would they do? They would put a little bindi, and they would also put here. When I went to the US for study, everybody used to ask me, so why do Indians put this bindi on the forehead? So all my friends, they all had different answers. Somebody said, oh, it's a symbol for being married, or I don't know what. Everybody made up their own stories because nobody knows why they put bindi. Right? So, but you have to sound as though you know things, so you just give one big bhashan of why we wear bindi. Somebody says, oh, it's only a decoration. People have their own answers. But the reality is, culturally, what? You remind yourself that the divinity which is everywhere is also here, in the body. So that means, imagine what it will do to your self-esteem. This physical body that you have is not meant for you to have all kinds of projections and condemn yourself, and it is a gift from divinity. You're a trustee of this body, and you have this is entrusted to you, and this is something which is part of divinity. So every day you remind yourself that this body is a gift. And gift from where? Did you create this body? If you wanted to create the body, you would make every part something else. A little taller, a little thinner. And it never ends. Never ends.
Never satisfied.
Never satisfied. Right? It is a gift, and you have to look after it. And you have to and remind yourself that, just as every other body is also a gift. Nobody has created their own body. Not only you, nobody has created. So while you are a trustee, you have a certain responsibility. But the problem is that which is given to you as a gift, through which you accomplish things, you take it as I and suffer from. It's like the instrument which is given to you, which is a very useful instrument. That instrument you start thinking, I am. Okay, so that means even if you're much more than the body, you can't be indifferent to this body. And looking after the body, please erase these words of materialistic, because there is no such thing called materialistic in this universe. I will show you all that is here is Ishvara. This is the vision of Bhagavad Gita. What is material, what is spiritual, these are all constructs of people who don't know what they are talking about. Okay? It is something which is the gift. So therefore, the body itself is an instrument. What is it made up of? No, it's not made up of fast matter.
5 elements.
Exactly. So that means if you take the Vedic model, this whole sophisticated body that you have is made up of 5 elements. What are the 5 elements? Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apaha and Prithvi. What are these 5 elements? Akasha is space. Where do you find space in the body? Exactly. So between two muscles you have, what is there? Space. In the stomach, right? All these organs that you have, each one ends and the other one begins. What is there in between? Space, right? So therefore, there is space everywhere. They don't think space is only outside in the empty this thing. Space is all here, right? Now, the weight that we are all obsessed about. You go to any person who knows anything about anatomy, they'll say a lot of our weight is weight of water, right? So therefore, there is all this water which is what in our body. So you take out air, you can't actually take out air. Then water. Then air. Where is air? Absolutely. Every minute, try to keep your nose closed. For how many seconds you think you can keep it closed? How many minutes? You haven't even tried, and thank God. Right? So that means constantly you are what? Breathing in this air. The external air, when it enters your nostrils and goes into your system, what do we call it? Prana. We call it prana because it's no longer what? Just the air. What it has functions. What does it do? That air that you breathe in, what does it do? It gives oxygen, and the oxygen is very much needed for what? Your organs to function, for your what? Blood to be producing hemoglobin. That air, that clean air is so important. This is why in Delhi, because people breathe this, they have this even odd whatever. Yeah. So that means there's so much of your daily functions which you take for granted are done by what? The presence of that air. When you breathe in, it becomes I. When you breathe out, it becomes what?
Air.
Not I. Magic. That means what? Our whole understanding air is never I. But when it enters, we think it is I. It becomes I. Water is never I. When external water, river water, it is not I. But when it is inside your body, it becomes what? I. Unfortunately. This is a mistake we make. Right? Each non-I, the space is I? No. The air is I? No. The water is I? No. Right? Then Agni. Agni is what?
Fire.
Fire. Where do you see fire in your body? The heat. Absolutely. How is heat produced? The body, in order for you to survive, there is a self-generating heat. Heat, the generating mechanism. Okay. How does it produce heat? Do you know how it produces heat?
I guess with the blood circulation.
Through the blood circulation. It produces it. That blood is, it has a temperature which is warm, and it produces. And this is why that, if you have cold extremities, what will they say? Your blood circulation is weak. So there is this whole big mechanism of producing heat. the food that you eat actually contributes to produce. That's why you can't be anorexic. You don't eat food and you're afraid of eating food. You are actually damaging the whole system. The whole balance of this system depends upon the food that you eat. Okay? So therefore there is this heat. So therefore the digestive system also contributes to producing heat. Okay? Then you have earth. Exactly. Skin. Okay? So therefore this whole body that you think I am is made up of what? 5 elements. Each of the 5 elements, the air, the space, the fire, the water, the earth, is not I. But when they come together and they perform this specific function, in your understanding, what it becomes I. So what Bhagavad Gita says is, this is a mistake. Body is a body. It's an intelligent mechanism. It is given to you for a certain time, okay? But the problem is, because you are given special relationship with only one body and not other bodies, we take it as I, and we suffer from the limitation of the body as limitation of I. Okay? So therefore, this limitation we are suffering ashocha nanvashochastvam. It is not what? It's not wise for us to suffer from something which is not there. Right? So therefore, now, the second sense of I, so that means now we've understood that the body is not I, because of these various reasons. It's an object. What are the 2 reasons we gave? It's an object of my awareness, and the second thing is what? It is made up of 5 elements, and all those 5 elements are what?
Space, earth, water.
Yeah, and each one of them is not I. Right? If I ask you, are you water or not? What is your answer? No. Are you fire or not? What is your answer? No. Right? So when the water and fire come together, does it become I? No. All non-I's don't add up to make I. Logic. Right? So therefore, this is what you are not. The second big sense of I that you have is in what?
Mind.
In your mind. Okay? So that means you define yourself as, if I what you do, what did you say, how you feel, how you, what else did you say, what you studied. Okay, so when you say I'm a doctor, or I'm a physicist, or I'm architect, or whatever, okay, it's all, everything that you have, or I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I'm feeling low, or whatever, or I'm feeling good. All these different definitions are with reference to what? Your mind. Okay? Now, you have to understand what is the relationship that you have with the mind. Is mind I, or I is something more than the mind? So therefore, what do you think? Excellent. So mind is, okay, why do you say that? It's true, your answer is right, but you have to.
How will you know who is I? How will the opposite person know who is I? So, your mind, or what your thoughts that you portray, everything around you is determined by the I.
Okay. This is something, let's say that the sense of I that you have right now is not just the thought that you had 1 minute ago, right? Is it? Or from this morning. The sense of I that you have, right, is like, let's say 1 minute ago you were feeling really peaceful. But do you define yourself as just that peaceful I? No. How would you define yourself?
As an observer of the change of emotion.
That is with Vedanta, but what
Facets
she is saying,
together?
exactly, absolutely. So your sense of I is right now that you enjoy without Vedanta is many different facets you put together, right? So that means one aspect is what? Your education, somebody said. The other is what? Your emotions. The third is what?
Your occupation.
Your occupation. So that means in your I sense you have very good, Roxy. Okay, you've put together lots of different
That's it.
facets, and you have created one sense of I. And all those different facets are what? Variable. Variable because what? Let's say you define yourself by the emotion. How many different emotions you have had from the time of your birth till now?
Oh my heavens.
Oh my heavens, you can't even begin to answer that question. So what is the reality? That emotions have come and gone.
Change.
They have changed. And who are you? You are the one who
Witness.
comes to know the presence and absence of these emotions. So that means, are you the emotion or you are the observer of the emotion? You are the observer. And what is the mistake you make?
You become the emotion.
You become the emotions. Right? Emotions are there. Nobody can deny the presence of the emotion. The fact is that they are changing. And the reality is, who are you? You are the observer of these emotions. And the mistake that we make is, we take ourselves to be
The
what?
emotion itself.
The emotion itself.
And get hysterical.
And then we get hysterical. Yeah, true. And then we want to, because we want to have a good self-image, we try to what? Control or suppress the emotions. This is the worst thing you can do. And especially if you do it in the name of spirituality, you're hooked forever. Emotions, try to hold on to any one emotion. How long will you hold on? Try. Any thought in your mind will last for how long? Seconds. Millisecond? Yeah.
Within it, I'm thinking, I want to be happy, but then there are 1,000 things going on behind it.
Absolutely. Right? So that means it is the duration of that one thought is millisecond. And still, if what is the cost of taking yourself to be the mind? If I think that this thought is I, then I think and I connect all the different thoughts and impute it all on me, and I can say I'm depressed for 1 year. That millisecond, I first make that mistake and then I build up on that millisecond, make another millisecond, then another millisecond, and I create one whole self-image.
The puppet man.
Yeah, absolutely. Those who came to Rishikesh, they know.
I missed that point.
And that story has become like a big success. Everybody remembers this Papad story. Yeah. Okay. So the Papad story goes like that, and that's exactly what Roxy is saying. You know how we build up things, right? So there was this event where there was a big celebration, and a lot of people were invited for dinner or lunch or whatever. Okay, and the food was being served, so they were all sitting next to each other, and so one person would come and give you rice, and the next one, how they serve this food in this marriage and thing. Now I think they don't do it, but before they used to do it. So jamats, exactly, jamvanu, yeah, jamanvar, exactly, jamanvar. So this is a Gujarati typical, that use it. And then what happened is that everything was being served, and also one of the items was papad. Okay. Now the man came and he was serving papad and everything, and he was observing, and everybody got this papad, nice, everybody got, and he got half papad, and then the man gave, and then he gave, and so he was looking everywhere, and he says, everybody got full papad and I got half papad. And he started building on that. The host doesn't like me, he wants to insult me. He has done all this to just show me, put me down in front of everyone. And then he created this whole big story. By the time he did not enjoy the food, he went home and he said, how can I get back? This is a big insult. I was humiliated in front of everyone. I want to show this guy and I want to teach him a lesson. And then the person said, okay, now what I'm going to do? I'm going to tit for tat. I'm going to again I'll also call a lot of people home, and I will serve everyone full papad, and I'll serve him half papad and give him quarter, and that will make him feel see how it feels to be humiliated. So therefore he says, yeah, but where do I have money to give such a big party? This is okay, doesn't matter, I'm going to work really hard, right? So he works for 10 years to accumulate enough money. Then he has enough money, then he calls everyone, and then he again makes everything, and he strategically puts that man in the middle so that he sees that everybody gets full papad and he gets half papad. So everything is served, and then his turn comes, he's given half papad, and everybody gets full papad. And after the whole thing is done, this person doesn't even notice anything. For him, it's a non-event. So this man is so angry, it's like he thought that he's teaching him a lesson. For the other person, it was what? He didn't even notice that it is he's given half and everybody is given full. It was a non-event. He got so upset, and he went to him and he said, aren't you upset? And he said, for what? He says, see, everybody got, and you... So he says, so what? Maybe there is some mistake, and the man is serving and he doesn't pay attention and all. So he was like, oh my God, what I was suffering for 20 years, I created this whole big story in my head. How many thoughts? One thought? How many thoughts? Many, many, many. Many, many, many what? Milliseconds of thoughts creates one what? One story, and we get totally identified with that story, and we live from that story, thinking that this is the reality. Okay.
Full imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, to a certain degree, we all, even if we are objective, right? We live with this whole identity of what small thoughts, adding them up and making our self-image. Many different facets. Thoughts are just milliseconds duration. And who are you? You're the observer of that coming and going of the thought. And our whole identity becomes what? The basis of the different aspects of that thought life. Okay, so therefore this is something, and that nobody thinks, because everybody does it, nobody recognizes a mistake. We all do it. Okay, so what are the different facets of thought that Roxy was talking about? It's not just we have only one type of mind, we have different aspects of the mind. Okay, so therefore this Vedanta Shastra talks about different aspects of the mind, different facets that we have. This mind, which is nothing but thoughts, have 4 major categories. What are those categories? The first one is what we call manas. Okay, what is manas? Manas is described in 2 different ways. One is, it is the emotional center. Okay, emotions that come. So that means when you see, let's say one of my friends, he says, I go on Marine Drive for a morning jog, and there is this overhead bridge, and under the bridge a lot of families are living under the bridge, and they are little, and early morning the parents are sleeping and the boys are awake, the boys and girls are awake, and they start running around, and he says, oh my God, I get such fear, because what if one boy starts running across, and if a car is going fast early in the morning because there is no traffic, what will happen, right? So therefore there is this center which is the fear center, right? And that is something which is healthy. Please don't call that fear a negative emotion. Imagine you don't have any sense of anything. What kind of life it is? Dull. Okay, so the person is concerned, and that concern is a good thing. So that is that aspect of the mind which not only observes a child but also has a corresponding compassion, fear. This is what we call manas, emoting mind. We look at events and we have corresponding emotions. Okay, so this is called manas. In some other text, this manas is also defined as sankalpa vikalpatmikaha manaha. What does it mean is, let's say a situation presents itself in front of us, and then we say, should I do this or should I do that? That aspect also belongs to manas.
So what should we write? Manas is defined as?
So sankalpa and vikalpa means the different possibilities. It creates different possibilities.
Gives you choice.
Sorry?
Gives you
It
choice
is actually,
to decide.
see, exactly, it creates choices.
It creates
Choices, right? You have to say now simple things like you are crossing the road, right? You can say, should I go now or should I not?
Yeah.
It creates what? Possibilities. Who you create. It's not somebody else. You create the choices. So that facet of the mind which creates what? Different choices, that is manas. Should I do this or should I do that? Should I speak up or should I not speak up?
That's the discriminating.
No. That is buddhi. That is buddhi.
So it's not
Within those choices, then the discriminative capacity makes that choice within different options.
Okay, within the
Options,
options,
that is the intellect.
I confused.
Yeah. So therefore, there is one capacity which is, now what time? The time is over? It's 1:45. Okay. So I will stop here, but I will just say that there are 4 aspects, 4 facets of the mind. Which are the 4? I will explain to you more in detail. And then I will tell you all these 4 facets you are not, and then I will tell you who you are. Yes? So, the first aspect is manas, which is the emoting and that creating choices, creating options. The second one is buddhi, which is the intellect or a discriminative capacity. The third one is chittam, and the fourth one is ahankara. So I will explain each one in detail next time. I've pretty much finished with manas, but I will look into buddhi, chittam and ahankara. Okay, so this is all what you are not. And what is the nature of confusion? You have taken yourself to be all this. Right? This is Bhagavad Gita. What it has to show you is way beyond your imagination. Yes? Okay. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.